30,000 feet above the clouds, first-class cabin, two men who should never have met. Travis Kelce, football superstar, settles into his window seat when Blake Thompson, his most vocal online critic, sits down beside him. The universe has a strange sense of humor. The flight attendants can feel the tension. Other passengers sense it too. For years, Blake has built his career destroying Travis online. Now they breathe the same recycled air for the next 5 hours. Travis could ignore him. Travis could confront him. Instead, he does something no one expects, something that will change both their lives forever. Some lessons aren't taught on the football field. Some victories don't come with trophies. This is the story of the day Travis Kelce shut down a hater with the most unforgettable lesson of all. Travis Kelce boarded United Airlines Flight 2478 to Los Angeles, his mind focused on the charity event awaiting him. The first-class cabin offered its usual comforts: leather seats, champagne, and the privacy he craved after a grueling season with Kansas City. He settled into seat 2A, baseball cap pulled low, hoping for 5 hours of peace before the cameras found him again. The flight attendant had just handed him his customary sparkling water when Travis noticed a familiar face approaching. Blake Thompson, the sports commentator whose career was built on tearing down his accomplishments. Travis felt his jaw tighten. Of all the flights and all the seats, somehow the universe had placed his biggest critic directly beside him. Blake Thompson froze momentarily when recognition hit, his designer laptop bag clutched tightly against his chest. At 37, Blake's once athletic frame had softened, but his sharp eyes retained the intensity that made his commentary shows so popular among football critics. For 3 years, he had dissected Travis Kelce's every move, every catch, every celebration, always finding fault, always suggesting that tight end's success came from luck rather than skill. Now fate had eliminated the comfortable distance of television screens and social media. Blake's hand trembled slightly as he stored his bag and lowered himself into seat 2B, avoiding eye contact with the man he had made a career out of hating. The plane pushed back from the gate as an uncomfortable silence settled between them. Other passengers whispered and pointed, sensing the tension crackling like static electricity. The captain announced their flight time, 5 hours and 23 minutes to Los Angeles. Travis glanced at his watch, then out the window at the Kansas City skyline disappearing beneath clouds. 5 hours trapped beside the man who had called him overrated, undeserving, and lucky. 5 hours that would normally feel like nothing. But today, in this pressurized cabin with nowhere to escape, those 5 hours stretched before Travis like an eternity. What neither man realized as the plane climbed higher was that this flight would change both their lives in ways neither could imagine. 30 minutes into the flight, the tension between Travis and Blake became unbearable. Blake tapped aggressively on his keyboard, occasionally stealing glances at Travis while drafting what appeared to be his next hit piece. The flight attendant offered the first-class meal service, her eyes widening when she recognized the two men and the awkward situation unfolding. Travis politely accepted his pre-ordered grilled salmon, while Blake requested a double scotch, neat, liquid courage for the confrontation brewing inside him. Other passengers watched the scene unfold like a silent movie, pretending to read magazines or watch movies while actually witnessing the spectacle in seats 2A and 2B. When Blake's scotch arrived, he downed it in one swift motion and immediately asked for another, his confidence growing with each sip. Blake finally broke the silence with a thinly veiled comment about overpaid athletes taking up valuable space in first class. His words hung in the air like poison, intended to pierce through Travis's calm exterior. The cabin pressure seemed to drop as several passengers gasped softly, eyes now openly fixed on the unfolding drama. Travis set down his fork, turned slightly toward Blake and studied him with the same focus he used to read defenses on the field. His expression remained neutral, but his eyes revealed calculations happening behind them. The same strategic thinking that made him one of football's greatest tight ends. Rather than react with anger, Travis smiled slightly, confusing Blake and everyone watching this high-altitude standoff. The unexpected smile triggered something in Blake, a crack in his carefully constructed armor of hostility. His face flushed. Red, whether from embarrassment or the scotch, remained unclear. He mumbled something about bathroom needs and stumbled past Travis toward the lavatory, nearly tripping over another passenger's feet. In the confined bathroom space, Blake splashed cold water on his face and stared at his reflection. The man looking back appeared smaller somehow, diminished by Travis's refusal to engage in the petty battle he had initiated. Meanwhile, Travis pulled out his phone and began scrolling through old articles and videos featuring Blake Thompson. What he discovered made his eyebrows raise slightly. Information that would shift the power dynamic between them entirely once Blake returned to his seat. The plane hit a patch of turbulence as Blake returned to his seat, the physical shaking mirroring the emotional turbulence between the two men. Travis put his phone away but kept his discovery close to his chest. 15 years ago, Blake Thompson had been a rising star quarterback at Ohio State, breaking records and destined for NFL glory. Old highlight reels showed a talented player with incredible arm strength and field vision, a young man whose smile radiated pure joy when playing the game he loved. Then came the championship game against Michigan during his senior year. A blindside hit, a catastrophic knee injury, 3 failed surgeries, dreams shattered in 60 seconds of game time that changed everything. The turbulence settled, but the revelation continued to shake Travis's understanding of the man beside him. Blake settled back into his seat, his earlier bravado deflated, replaced by something closer to resignation. He pulled out a worn leather notebook and began writing furiously, occasionally glancing at Travis with an expression that flickered between contempt and something deeper, perhaps envy or regret. Travis pretended to watch the in-flight movie, but his mind raced with connections forming between Blake's past and present. The vicious articles, the personal attacks, the obsessive criticism of Travis's playing style. It all made sense now. Blake wasn't just a random hater. He was a man watching another live, the life that should have been his. Travis felt the weight of that realization settle over him like a heavy blanket, uncomfortable yet impossible to ignore. The flight attendant announced they were halfway to Los Angeles, the plane cruising at 37,000 feet over the Rocky Mountains. Below them, magnificent peaks and valleys stretched across the landscape, oblivious to human dramas unfolding above. Travis removed his earbuds and turned fully toward Blake, his decision made. He would not spend the remaining hours in uncomfortable silence, pretending not to know what he now understood. Blake sensed the shift and looked up from his notebook, surprised to find Travis extending his hand in greeting, as if they were meeting for the first time. Blake's expression changed from confusion to suspicion to something unreadable as he slowly closed his notebook. The moment stretched between them like a tightrope, with both men poised at opposite ends, unsure whether to step forward or retreat. Travis kept his hand extended, his eyes locked on Blake with an intensity usually reserved for fourth-quarter game-winning drives. Around them, the cabin seemed to grow quieter, as if the plane itself held its breath. After what felt like an eternity, Blake reluctantly accepted the handshake, his grip weak and uncertain compared to Travis's firm confidence. Travis leaned in and spoke quietly, mentioning Ohio State, the championship game, and the injury that changed everything. Blake pulled his hand away as if burned, his face draining of color. The carefully constructed facade he had maintained for years cracked open in that moment, raw emotion flooding through. His lips trembled slightly as he looked away, staring. at nothing, seeing only the past that had been violently taken from him on that football field 15 years ago. Travis pulled out his phone again and showed Blake the old footage he had found, highlights of a younger Blake Thompson slicing through defenses with surgical precision, throwing perfect spirals that seemed to defy physics. Blake watched his former self with a mixture of pride and pain, his hands shaking as he touched the screen gently, as if trying to reach back through time. Travis continued speaking in hushed tones, not about Blake's criticism or the tension between them, but about the talent he saw in those old videos. The genuine admiration in Travis's voice caught Blake off guard, confusion replacing the defensive anger he had carried onto the plane. For the first time in years, someone was talking to Blake about what he had been, not what he had lost. The realization hit him with unexpected force, tears threatening at the corners of his eyes. The confrontation shifted into something neither man had anticipated, an honest conversation about dreams, disappointment, and the thin line between success and failure in professional sports. Blake finally spoke back, his voice barely audible above the drone of the engines. He admitted to the bitterness that had consumed him, how watching Travis succeed where he should have been felt like dying again every Sunday. Travis listened without interruption or judgment, allowing Blake the dignity of his pain. Neither noticed, the flight attendant hesitating nearby, reluctant to interrupt the intense exchange with offers of beverage service. She observed the two men with knowing eyes that had witnessed countless human dramas unfold in the artificial world of air travel. As she turned away to give them privacy, she caught sight of an elderly woman in seat 1C watching the scene unfold with unusual interest, a mysterious smile playing at the corners of her lips. Travis leaned back in his seat, his expression thoughtful as he prepared to share something he had never told anyone in the media. The cabin lights dimmed slightly as the plane continued its journey westward, creating an atmosphere of unexpected intimacy. Travis revealed that as a college player, he had studied Blake Thompson game tapes religiously, modeling elements of his own playing style after Blake's innovative approaches to the game. He described specific plays from Blake's college career in such detail that Blake could only stare in disbelief. The quarterback who never was had unknowingly mentored the tight end who became a legend. Travis spoke with genuine reverence about how Blake's field vision and creativity had influenced an entire generation of players, including himself. This revelation landed like a thunderbolt in the small space between their seats, electrifying the air with unspoken emotions. Blake sat perfectly still, his cynical worldview crumbling under the weight of Travis's words. For 15 years, he had nursed his grievances, feeding his pain with the belief that the football world had forgotten him completely. Yet here sat one of the game's greatest players, confessing that Blake's brief career had left an indelible mark on the sport. Well, the passengers in first class had abandoned all pretense of not listening, several removing headphones to witness the extraordinary scene unfolding. A businessman in seat 3C wiped away a tear, reminded of his own abandoned dreams. 2. College. Students traveling home recorded snippets on their phones, sensing they were witnessing something profound. Through the narrow aisle, the elderly woman in seat 1C observed with knowing eyes, as if she had always expected this moment would come. The plane hit another patch of turbulence, stronger this time, forcing the flight attendants to suspend service and return to their jump seats. The physical disruption mirrored the emotional earthquake, reshaping Blake's perception of his life and legacy. His hands gripped the armrests as the plane bounced through rough air, his knuckles white with tension. When he finally found his voice, it carried none of the bitter edge that had defined his broadcasting career. Instead, a vulnerable question emerged, asking Travis why he had never mentioned this influence in any interview, despite years of Blake's public criticism. Travis's answer was simple, yet profound. He had been waiting for the right moment to He thanked Blake in person rather than through media channels. He reached into his carry-on bag and pulled out something that made Blake's breath catch in his throat. A game ball from Travis's record-breaking performance last season, already inscribed with words that would forever change Blake Thompson's understanding of his place in football history. Blake stared at the game ball in Travis's hands, his fingers hovering inches away, afraid to touch what felt like an alternate reality materializing before him. The inscription read, "To the quarterback who taught me to see the whole field, your legacy lives on in every play." The authenticity of the moment was interrupted when the seatbelt sign dinged on again, accompanied by the captain announcing, "More turbulence ahead." As if on cue, the plane dipped sharply, causing a flight attendant to stumble against their row. She apologized profusely while steadying herself, her experienced eyes noting the unusual scene, a sports star and his critic sharing what appeared to be a profound moment. She introduced herself as Eleanor, mentioning she had been flying these skies for 42 years. There was something in her weathered face and kind eyes that commanded attention, a quiet wisdom that seemed out of place, yet perfectly timed. Eleanor straightened her uniform and shared that she needed to secure the cabin, but would return. True to her word, once the turbulence subsided, she reappeared beside their seats with 3 cups of coffee. Without waiting for an invitation, she settled into the empty seat across the aisle. Eleanor revealed she had recognized both men immediately. Her late husband had been a dedicated football fan who never missed a game. With gentle authority that comes only from decades of life experience, she began speaking about her own journey. She had once been a promising concert pianist whose career ended with arthritis in her 30s. The parallels to Blake's story hung in the air, unspoken but obvious. Eleanor described her years of bitterness, how she had avoided music entirely, unable to bear hearing what she could no longer create. Her story flowed between them like a river, finding new channels through resistant soil. The plane cruised steadily now at 35,000 feet, the Rocky Mountains giving way to the Nevada desert below. Eleanor continued her unexpected intervention, describing how she had eventually found herself again by teaching music to disadvantaged children. Her greatest student, she revealed with quiet pride, now played with the Boston Symphony Orchestra. She gently suggested that legacies are not always lived in the way we imagine them. Blake and Travis listened in respectful silence, both recognizing the rare gift of wisdom being offered freely at 35,000 feet. When Eleanor finished speaking, she patted Blake's hand with grandmotherly affection before rising to resume her duties. The silence she left behind felt sacred somehow, a space where new possibilities were taking shape. Travis looked at Blake with newfound respect, no longer seeing just a critic, but a man standing at a crossroads. Blake gazed back, the hardened cynicism in his eyes replaced by something far more rare and valuable: hope. The flight attendants announced the beginning of their descent into Los Angeles, the sprawling city appearing on the horizon like a vast constellation of earthbound stars. Travis finished his coffee and set the cup aside, his expression shifting to one of focused determination. He pulled out his phone again, but this time he opened his photo gallery and showed Blake images from his charity foundation, the Kelce Connection. Pictures revealed young athletes with injuries similar to what had ended Blake's career, working with top medical specialists and training with adaptive equipment. Travis scrolled through success stories. A young quarterback who lost mobility, in one leg, now playing college ball with a specialized brace. A wide receiver who recovered from spinal trauma to become a Paralympic gold medalist. With each image, Travis built a bridge between Blake's past pain and a possible future purpose. The proposal came without fanfare or dramatic build-up. Travis simply asked if Blake would consider joining the foundation as a mentor and spokesperson. working directly with injured young athletes who faced the same devastating crossroads Blake had encountered 15 years ago. Blake's eyes widened as the full implications of the offer registered. This wasn't charity or pity, it was recognition of his unique perspective and expertise. The foundation needed someone who truly understood the psychological devastation that accompanied career-ending injuries, not just the physical rehabilitation. Travis explained how young athletes often recovered physically but remained emotionally broken, unable to envision a meaningful life beyond their shattered dreams. Blake possessed what these kids desperately needed: first-hand understanding of their darkest moments. The city below grew larger as the plane continued its descent, the changing perspective mirroring Blake's shifting worldview. Travis waited patiently, allowing Blake space to process everything. Around them, several passengers who had been following. The unfolding drama leaned forward slightly, invested in Blake's response. Even Eleanor paused in the galley, watching from a respectful distance. Blake stared out the window at the approaching city, his reflection in the plexiglass revealing a face caught between past and future. The foundation offer represented everything he had needed, but never received after his injury: purpose, community, and a chance to transform personal tragedy into something meaningful. His broadcasting career, built on criticism and negativity, suddenly seemed hollow compared to the authentic impact he could have working with these young athletes. The plane banked gently to align with the runway, the change in direction symbolic of the choice before him. Blake turned back to Travis, words forming slowly as emotions threatened to overwhelm his carefully maintained composure. The cabin pressurization changed as they descended, causing a slight discomfort in everyone's ears. Blake cleared his throat, his decision hovering on the edge of utterance. The pilot announced their final approach to Los Angeles International Airport, wheels preparing to touch down on California soil. Whatever Blake Thompson decided in these next moments would forever alter the trajectory of both men's lives. The plane touched down on the runway with a gentle bump, the wheels making contact with Los Angeles soil at the exact moment Blake made contact with his own truth. His face transformed as years of bitterness melted away, replaced by an expression rarely seen in the cynical world of sports commentary: raw vulnerability. Blake turned to Travis, his voice cracking with emotion, as he accepted the offer to join the foundation. The simple act of saying yes seemed to physically change him, his shoulders straightening as if relieved of an invisible burden carried for 15 long years. Other passengers who had been silently witnessing this drama spontaneously broke into applause, their collective response a testament to the universal power of redemption. Even the most jaded travelers among them recognized they had witnessed something extraordinary, a genuine human transformation at 35,000 feet over America. As passengers began collecting their belongings and preparing to deplane, Blake remained seated, overwhelmed by the emotional journey that had eclipsed the physical one. He pulled out his leather notebook again, but instead of writing another critical piece about Travis, he began drafting ideas for working with young athletes. His hands moved with an energy and purpose that had been absent for years, filling page after page with concepts for mentorship programs and psychological support systems. Travis watched with quiet satisfaction, recognizing the creative brilliance that had once made Blake a standout quarterback, now channeled into a new purpose. Eleanor passed by their row one final time, her knowing smile suggesting she had seen such transformations before in her decades of traversing the skies. She placed a hand briefly on Blake's shoulder, a silent blessing for the journey ahead. The seatbelt sign dinged off as the aircraft reached its gate, signaling the end of their flight, but the beginning of something far more significant. Blake, wiped unexpected tears from his eyes, embarrassed yet relieved to finally release emotions suppressed since that catastrophic game day in college. Fellow passengers filed past, several nodding in acknowledgement of what they had witnessed. A teenage boy stopped briefly, awkwardly asking for autographs from both men, not just from Travis the star, but also from Blake, whom the boy recognized from his broadcasting work. As Blake signed, the boy mentioned his own recent knee injury and how it had ended his high school football dreams. The synchronicity of the moment struck Blake profoundly, the universe seemingly confirming his decision through this chance encounter. When the boy moved on, Blake looked at Travis with newfound clarity. The man he had despised for living his dream was now offering him something far more valuable than fame or athletic glory, the chance to transform his greatest pain into purpose, his deepest wound into wisdom that could heal others. 6 months after that fateful flight, the summer sun beat down on a football field in Kansas City. Young athletes in various stages of physical rehabilitation ran drills under the watchful eyes of two men who once represented opposite ends of the sports world. Travis Kelce adjusted the specialized brace on a teenage quarterback's leg, demonstrating throwing mechanics that would accommodate the injury. 20 yards away, Blake Thompson knelt beside a young receiver who had recently lost mobility in one arm, showing him alternative catching techniques developed during his own recovery years ago. The transformation in Blake was remarkable to everyone who had known him before. The bitter critic had disappeared, replaced by a passionate mentor whose understanding of athletic disappointment provided exactly what these young people needed. His weekly podcast, Rise Again, had become required listening for sports medicine professionals and injured athletes nationwide. Its honest exploration of both physical and emotional recovery filling a crucial gap in sports rehabilitation. Watching from the sidelines was Elena Martinez, the flight attendant whose wisdom had helped catalyze this unlikely partnership. Now retired after 45 years in the skies, she had accepted Travis and Blake's invitation to witness the Foundation's summer camp. Her eyes misted as she observed Blake working with a particularly frustrated young athlete, recognizing in his patient approach the same hard-won wisdom she had shared on that turbulent flight months ago. The Kelce connection had expanded significantly since Blake joined, his unique perspective attracting both media attention and substantial new funding. What began as a small operation now employed top sports psychologists and cutting-edge rehabilitation specialists, creating comprehensive recovery programs that addressed both body and spirit. The waiting list for admission had grown so long that Travis and Blake were already planning regional expansion centers in 5 additional cities. As the training session concluded, the young athletes gathered in a circle at midfield, their faces showing the unique mixture of determination and vulnerability that came with rebuilding dreams. Travis stepped forward to address them, but then surprised everyone by inviting Blake to speak instead. Blake surveyed the hopeful faces before him, seeing reflections of his younger self in each one. The profound symmetry of the moment was not lost on him. Standing on a football field again, but in a role he could never have imagined for himself. Behind the group, professional camera crews set up equipment for the documentary they were filming about the Foundation's work, titled Second Chances. As Blake began speaking about resilience and reinvention, Travis caught Eleanor's eye across the field, exchanging a look of quiet satisfaction. The unlikely friendship between player and critic had evolved into something extraordinary, touching, lives far beyond their own. The spiral of resentment that had defined Blake for 15 years had transformed into an upward cycle of healing and purpose. As the Kansas City skyline gleamed in the distance, the football field became a sanctuary of second chances, proof that sometimes the most unforgettable lessons arrive in the most unexpected places, even in first class at 35,000 feet.